Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Alex. In today's video, we're going to be doing a tier list ranking on all of the Eastern Conference teams going into next season. Now, I'm not going to be ranking each team within the tier. This is simply just kind of what tier I think they're at. Do I think they're championship contenders? Do I think they're absolutely trash? Let's find out. All right, here we are in our tier maker website. So for our championship contenders, I have them listed as Sigmas. For our playoff teams, not quite championship level, but also not play-in, we have the good but not great. For our play-in teams, we're going to put them into the play-in party. For my teams who aren't absolutely trash but also probably won't make it to the play-in tournament, I'm going to put them in the tier. And then for our absolutely trash teams, we're sending these fools to the gulag. Now let's get started, and we're just going to go in order with what the teams are listed here for us. And for our first team, we have the Brooklyn Nets. And for me, I think I'm going to put the Brooklyn Nets into the tier. Obviously, this Brooklyn Nets team is so much more different than what we saw from last year. I mean, they started off with Kevin Durant, Kyrie, ended up having Mikal Bridges as their best player. Now, I love Mikal Bridges. With his increased role that we saw last year, I think he's going to continue to do that. However, I just don't know what a Mikal Bridges team is truly going to do in the league. After that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving trade, the Nets were pretty much a slightly below 500 team. And if that's the case, of course, they can be into this play-in party. But in my opinion, as we go along with these teams, I just think there are going to be teams that are going to be better than them. And of course, I kind of just talked about Mikal Bridges, but this team overall has some really good kind of supporting pieces that I think would be really good if they had some superstar players. But again, I just don't really think Mikal Bridges is going to be that sort of guy to pull him into this play-in tournament. And that's why I have them in the tier, because I think things can kind of go either way. I don't think they're going to be absolutely trash, but I also don't really have them into the play-in tournament. Next up, we got the Boston Celtics, and I think these are automatic Sigma. Like, there's no question about it. These guys were one game away from another finals appearance. Tatum is very well on his way to potentially slot himself as a top 5 player. I think for a lot of people, for me, not yet. He's just right on the outside, but he's one of the best players that we have in the league. And yes, Jaylen Brown cannot dribble with his left hand, but he is still a very good supporting piece next to Tatum. And they also got Kristaps Porzingis, and depending on how he kind of plays, I know he did get injured during the FIBA World Cup, so that will kind of throw things up in the air as well. But I think once we get towards the tail end of the season and everyone is going to be healthy, again, this is me kind of assuming that everyone is healthy because I don't want people to be injured. I think the Celtics are going to be one of the better teams. Losing Marcus Smart definitely does suck, but they still have Derek White, they still have Malcolm Brogdon, they still have some very good pieces on this team. I don't see why they can't make another finals run. Next up in the Eastern Conference, we're going to look over the Atlanta Hawks, and for me, I'm going to put them into the play-in party tier. They were in the play-in tournament last year. They were able to make their way up, and they went into the 8th seed and actually put up a decent fight against the Celtics, taking them to 6, I believe, from my memory, even despite DeJounte Murray missing a game due to suspension. But Trae Young had a really down year last year, and I think a lot of that has to do just with the fit with DeJounte Murray. I think things were a little bit weird, but hopefully, with a whole year of obviously experience with those two, John Collins not on the court as well, that could potentially help them as well, just adding maybe some better spacing around them. I just think Trae Young is not going to have as bad of a year as he did last year. I definitely do think he takes a step up, and I do think there's some young players on this team like Okongwu and AJ Griffin who I think can definitely put in some good minutes for them and potentially make them better than they were last year. But again, I just don't know how much better they can be. I don't think they're at that tier where they're going to be solidified playoff team, but I definitely don't think they're an team. They have Trae Young. They have some really good pieces on this team. I can definitely see them making a potential playoff push, maybe through the play-in tournament, but I got them in the play-in tournament somewhere between the 7 and 10 seed. Next up, we got the Chicago Bulls, and I'm also going to put them into this play-in party tier. I'm very low on the Chicago Bulls. I think they honestly need to just blow everything up because I don't think the pieces that they have now are going to give them any sort of life towards a championship run. But just as the team is currently constructed, I think a team with Vucevic, LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan can definitely make a play-in push. I mean, again, they were in the play-in just like the Hawks last year. They didn't quite make it into the playoffs, but I definitely do think, again, they are in this tier. I just don't really like the ceiling of this team. I think it's pretty low, but at least towards the floor, I don't think they're an team. They are in that purgatory, like I said. There's a lot of problems with this roster, but I do think that they are good enough to be in this play-in tier. Moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is going to be our first team in the good but not great tier. The Cavaliers are one of the best defenses in the NBA. Shout out to Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Shout out to Donovan Mitchell as well. Not defensively, of course, but in terms of the season that he had last year, I thought he was extremely good, definitely deserving to make an All-NBA team. But in the playoffs, he did not perform as well as he did in the regular season. Same thing with Darius Garland, had another incredible year in the regular season, but just didn't perform all too great in the playoffs. This is still a really young team, and while they did sign Max Strus and George Niang just to add some more spacing onto this team, I don't truly know how much impact those guys are gonna have with their spacing. I think it all kind of depends on the progression of Evan Mobley, if we see any sort of offensive jump that we truly just didn't see last season, and I think a lot of people were expecting a little bit more from him offensively. The defense is great on this team. That is not something that I'm worried about. The offense is truly what I'm worried about, because if they just don't have the spacing, they're really going to have to heavily rely on just pick and roll with Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and allowing Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell to just feast as scorers, and I just don't really know how good that's going to be for playoff translation. I think another question mark for this team as well is that small forward position, because even if you do want to start Max Strus at that small forward position just to provide some spacing, I don't really think he's all that great of a defender, and he's kind of undersized for a small forward position as well. So then now you have to consider, are you going to put Niang out there? I don't think so. I think Caris LeVert will most likely be their best option. But again, I still think they need an upgrade at that small forward position. And I think that's what truly limits them from going into that Sigma tier. But they're just great enough to not be in the plan. Moving on into the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm going to put them in the Ant tier. Yeah, the Charlotte Hornets were extremely bad last season, but LaMelo Ball also missed a majority of the season with a bunch of different ankle injuries. And now that Miles Bridges is back, despite whatever you think about Miles Bridges, when Miles Bridges and LaMelo Ball were playing together, and with just the entire team as a whole being healthy throughout the last couple years outside of last year, they made the play-in tournament. Now, do I think they're going to make the play-in tournament? No. That's why I have them in the Ant tier. I just think there are going to be better teams, but I don't think we need to send them to the gulag like we did last year. Assuming that LaMelo Ball is healthy, I do think he puts them up a notch, but just not enough to put them into the play-in tournament. I still think that this team has a lot of flaws. They do have a couple good pieces here and there, but overall as a team, I just don't really know the direction that the Charlotte Hornets want to go into. I think it all will kind of revolve around what Brandon Miller can do. I'm not too high on Brandon Miller, but if he does have a good season, I could potentially see the Charlotte Hornets making their way back into the play-in tournament. But again, I just think there's probably going to be some better teams than them. And that's kind of unfortunate because I like LaMelo Ball as a player. Moving on to the Detroit Pistons, and we got our first gulag team. Send these fools to the gulag. Despite me putting the Detroit Pistons in the gulag, I definitely do think they do have some high points on this team. I think Jaden Ivey had a pretty decent rookie year. Jalen Duren is one of my favorite underrated players in the league. He's one of the youngest players in the league, and he's a pretty much certified double-double guy, give you a block a game. And I think things could definitely be different depending on how Cade shapes up this year. He missed majority of the year last year. So depending on how much he improves as a player, and it has been quite a while, so it'd be interesting to see how much better he does get. I could potentially see them being an Ant team. Ausar Thompson could also have some really good upside, which could definitely help improve the Pistons team overall, depending on how he pans out his rookie year. But this team overall just has a lot of problems, and I just still think that they are developing, and I don't think they're quite ready yet to start winning some games, to even get them close to the play-in tournament. Even to the Ant tier, I just don't really know how great this team is going to be. And for that reason, I'm putting them into the gulag. Next up, we got the Indiana Pacers, and for me, I'm going to put them in the play-in party tier. I am a big Tyrese Halliburton fan. I think he's definitely going to take a step up. I loved what I've seen from him in the FIBA World Cup. Ben Mathurin had a decent rookie year, started off really great, kind of dipped down towards the tail end of the season, but it'll be interesting to see what he does in his sophomore year. I'm expecting a jump from him. Miles Turner had finally a breakout year. And the Pacers also got Obi Toppin and Bruce Brown, who I think are going to be some high-level role players for this team who are going to help them in transition, which I think is a huge part in what the Pacers are going to want to do, especially with Tyrese Halliburton on their team. It will be interesting to see what they do with Buddy Hield and Miles Turner because they're constantly into trade talks, so they may potentially not even be on this roster. But as this roster setup right now, I definitely do think they have the upside to make it into the play-in tournament and probably be better than the Nets. Moving on into the Miami Heat, and I think we just have to put them in the good but not great tier. Look, I know that they made the finals last year, but they lost a lot of players. They lost Gabe Vincent, they lost Max Strus, and those two guys were a big reason why they were able to make it to the finals. And depending on what happens with Damian Lillard, they could definitely be put into the Sigma tier. But as of right now, I just can't put them there. They haven't made that Dame trade yet. It could potentially not even happen. But just as this team is constructed right now, I definitely do think that they are good enough to be a solidified playoff team. Tyler Hero will be coming back, and as a young player, he should be getting better as well. How much better? I'm not sure, but I think a lot of this team's future is going to rest upon what happens with Damian Lillard. Again, if the Heat get Dame, I think they are a Sigma tier, but that just hasn't happened yet. So I got to put them into this good, but not great tier. Next up, we got the Toronto Raptors, and I'm going to put them in the A tier. They were in the play-in tournament last season, but because they lost Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam's future is also kind of up in the air as well, I just don't truly know how great this Raptors team is going to be. Scotty Barnes is an up-and-coming guy, and depending on how he progresses, he could definitely kind of push them up a level. I'm not throwing that out of the window, but much like the Charlotte Hornets, I'm just not really sure what direction the Raptors are going in right now, and if their hope is to make the play-in tournament, I don't really think that their goals are going in the right direction. I truly do think they need to start rebuilding a little bit more, which is why I do see Pascal Siakam eventually taking a move and getting traded somewhere else. And if that's the case, the Raptors can be sent to the gulag, but as of right now, I think they're good in this ant tier. Also, shout out to Grady Dick. Next up, we got the Milwaukee Bucks, and this is obviously a Sigma tier team. Yes, they lost in the first round against the Heat, and I have the Heat in the good, not great tier. That could definitely be a cause of concern for you guys, and I would definitely understand that, but I think a lot of us would probably say that if Giannis wasn't injured, the Bucks probably would have won that series. I personally don't think it would have happened regardless, because Jimmy Butler was just on a whole different level. But honestly, I feel like that was a big anomaly, especially with what we saw from Jimmy Butler in the rest of the playoffs. But just in general for the Bucks, to me, this is their last year to be truly title contenders. Drew Holiday's getting older. Chris Middleton is getting older. Brook Lopez is getting older. Giannis at this point is really focused on his future and just wanting to win. And if we're talking about Drew Holiday potentially retiring in the next 2 years, and we're not really sure what Chris Middleton's going to look like, especially coming off the injury-riddled season he had last year, this has to be a do-or-die season for the Bucks, and that could potentially be a video that I make in the future. But as it stands right now, the Bucks, obviously with Giannis Antetokounmpo and the supporting cast around him, they are potential championship favorites. Moving on to the New York Knicks, and I got them in the good but not great tier. Shout out to Jalen Brunson being the best player on the Knicks, not trash-ass Julius Randle. I think Brunson on his own is going to be able to really fulfill what the Knicks want to do, and it's to compete in the playoffs. And as a regular season team, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, those guys are all good. It's just when it comes to the playoffs, I just am not expecting much for them at all, especially with all these playoff droppers. As a team, as a whole, this is a really deep team, even with Obi Toppin being off this team now. He didn't really play all too much anyway, so I don't think he's going to be that big of a loss for them. They're going to be a really good defensive team, really hard-nosed, really good rebounding team, and again, in the regular season, they're going to win games. My concern is just the playoffs, and because of that reason, I don't think they're going to be a play-in team, but that's also why I wouldn't put them in the Sigma tier. It's just because I just don't think they're going to perform all too well in the playoffs. We got 3 teams left, and next up, we got the Orlando Magic, and this might surprise a lot of you, but I'm truly high on this team. I'm going to put them in the play-in party. I think if you wanted to debate the Brooklyn Nets being over the Orlando Magic, I think that would be totally fair. But to me, I really love what they're doing over there in Orlando. Franz Wagner continues to be a very underrated player in the NBA, a great two-way guy, good scorer. Paulo Banchero had an incredible rookie season. I think he's going to continue to progress. Wendell Carter Jr., another underrated center that I think fits perfectly with this team. Markelle Fultz really starting to bring it back, being a solid point guard for this team. And with young guys like Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, and Jet Howard, I definitely do think that they have the upside to make it into the play-in tournament. I also do think that this Orlando Magic team, just as currently constructed, can really cause a lot of matchup problems with just how big that each position is. Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr., Paulo, some very big guys, and Markelle Fultz, Nets, Anthony Black, some really tall point guards, Jalen Suggs being a hard-nosed defender as well. I think this team could really cause some matchup problems for a lot of people, and I think that on its own can win them a lot of regular season games. And I'm just really high on this team in general. Again, if you're not as high and you think of teams like the Charlotte Hornets, the Raptors, or the Nets deserve to be in this play-in party and not the Magic, I would totally understand. But at least for me personally, I like this Magic team, and I think they can win a lot of games this year. Next up, we got the Philadelphia 76ers, and I'm going to put them in the good, but not great. With or without Harden, I think the 76ers are going to be a really good team, but much like the Knicks, their playoff translation just isn't good. Joel Embiid poops his pants every time he makes it. If James Harden continues to stay on the 76ers team, he's going to poop his pants again as well. I'm also just not a fan of the depth on the Sixers. They lost Niang, which is one of their better bench players. Paul Reed is really good. DeAnthony Melton is really solid as well. But I think a lot of the team's success kind of depends on if Harden is traded, what do they get back for him? I feel like his trade value might be at its lowest right now. And if the 76ers don't really get much in return for James Harden, I think they're pretty screwed. Now, if they're able to get another star player back, or at least a borderline all-star, I definitely will think that it will continue to keep them in this good but not great. But again, I think it's the playoff translation that's really going to hold them back from being a Sigma tier level team. But no matter what, I don't think they'll find themselves in the play-in tournament unless major injuries happen to like Joel Embiid or Tyrese Maxey. And for our last team, the team we've all been waiting for, the Washington Wizards. Man, send these dudes to the gulag. There's not much to say. This is not going to be a very good team. Jordan Poole's going to get like 30 shots a game. So is Kyle Kuzma. There's not much to really be excited for with the Wizards. I don't know, man. Well, there's my tier ranking for all Eastern Conference teams going into next season. Let me know down below what y'all think. If you've enjoyed, make sure to like and sub. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year, so it means a lot. Check out my socials down below in the description, and you can check out the video somewhere on the screen. Anyways, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.